What would you do if the moment you trusted someone became the moment you realized your life might be in danger? Bright afternoon sunlight spills across a quiet residential street in Tennessee. Alyssa Hartman stands near the open door of her car, frozen mid-step. Across the street, someone is watching her, not casually, but carefully. And in that exact moment, Alyssa felt something she couldn't explain yet. The sudden, sinking certainty that the life she had been living might already be slipping out of her control. Franklin County, Tennessee. Alyssa Hartman had always believed she was careful with people. 32 years old, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of person who double-checked things others ignored. She paid attention to tone, to pauses, to the way someone's voice could change in a single sentence. And for most of her life, that instinct kept her safe. But on that particular afternoon, standing in the warm daylight outside her townhouse, something felt different. Not dramatic, not obvious, just wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't shout, the kind that whispers. Across the street, a dark sedan sat parked along the curb. It hadn't been there earlier. Alyssa knew that because she had walked past that exact spot 20 minutes before. Now the car was there, engine off, windows slightly tinted, someone inside, watching. She told herself it was nothing, maybe a delivery driver, maybe someone waiting for a friend. But her hands stayed frozen on the car door, because something else had just crossed her mind. Someone had been asking questions about her recently. Not friendly questions, precise ones. Questions about where she worked, when she usually got home, who she spent time with. At first, it had sounded harmless. Curiosity. But now, standing in the quiet sunlight, the pieces didn't feel harmless anymore. They felt connected. 3 days before that moment, Alyssa had been sitting inside a small cafe downtown. Normal day, normal conversation, until something strange happened. Someone mentioned her name, in a conversation she wasn't part of. Not loudly, but clearly enough that she heard it. She hadn't reacted. She hadn't turned around. But the way they said it stayed with her. Not friendly, not casual, measured. As if they were discussing someone they had already decided something about. She told herself she was overthinking. People hear things wrong all the time. But now, standing beside her car in broad daylight, she felt that same uneasy pressure creeping back into her chest. Across the street, the sedan door opened slightly. Not enough to see the person clearly. Just enough movement to confirm one thing. Someone really was sitting there, waiting. Alyssa slowly closed her car door. She didn't drive away. She didn't walk toward the house either. Because something inside her had just shifted. The kind of realization that arrives quietly, but changes everything. Someone knew more about her life than they should. And for the first time, Alyssa Hartman began to wonder if the danger wasn't coming from a stranger at all, but from someone who had already been close enough to learn everything they needed. But one detail didn't make sense, because by the end of that week, detectives would discover something chilling. The person who had been watching Alyssa that afternoon wasn't the one investigators were truly worried about. If someone was quietly studying your life, how long would it take before you noticed? Late morning sunlight spreads across the parking lot of a small office building. Alyssa Hartman sits inside her car, hands still on the steering wheel, not driving. Across the street, the dark sedan hasn't moved. And suddenly Alyssa realized something deeply unsettling. This might not be the first time someone had been watching her. The feeling didn't arrive all at once. Came slowly, like remembering something you wish you hadn't forgotten. Alyssa had always believed routines made life safer. Same coffee shop, same drive to work, same grocery store every Thursday afternoon. Predictable, comfortable. But sitting in her car that morning, a different thought began creeping in. Predictable routines also make someone easier to follow. Across the street, the sedan remained parked, still quiet, still patient, and the longer it stayed there, the harder it became for Alyssa to convince herself it meant nothing. She looked away, tried focusing on normal things. Her phone, the radio, passing delivery truck. But her mind had already started doing something else, replaying small memories that suddenly felt heavier than they should. For days earlier, Alyssa had noticed something strange outside her workplace. A man standing near the entrance, not going inside, not leaving, just waiting. At the time, it felt ordinary. People wait outside buildings all the time. But later that afternoon, when she stepped out for lunch, he was still there, standing in almost the same place, looking at his phone. Except once, briefly, he looked up, directly at her, not smiling, not surprised, just observing. She had told herself she was imagining things. Until now, because suddenly, the memory didn't feel harmless anymore. It felt deliberate. Back in the present, Alyssa glanced toward the sedan again. For a moment, nothing moved. Then the driver's door opened slightly. Again, just a few inches. Enough movement to confirm one thing. Someone was still inside, watching. Alyssa's chest tightened. Not panic. Something quieter than that. The slow, uncomfortable realization that the story unfolding around her might have started long before today. Much earlier than she realized. But investigators would later uncover something even more disturbing, because when detectives began reviewing the timeline, they discovered Alyssa's name had surfaced somewhere unexpected. Not in a police report, not in a complaint, but in a conversation that took place weeks earlier, between people who should have had no reason to talk about her at all. How do you trust your instincts when they're screaming danger, but everyone else sees nothing? Alyssa Hartman stands in her kitchen, hands trembling slightly over a cup of coffee. Sunlight glances off the counter, highlighting a single envelope she didn't recognize. No note, no signature. Just a plain envelope left where she always keeps her mail. Her heart sank. She knew immediately. Someone was sending her a message, and it wasn't friendly. Alyssa had always prided herself on noticing things others missed. The envelope wasn't just mail. It was a warning. Her mind raced back to the sedan, to the man outside her office, to the odd conversation at the cafe. All the small moments, harmless before, now threaded together. Pattern she couldn't ignore. 2 days ago, Alyssa had felt a subtle unease while leaving work. A shadow lingering near the parking lot. She hadn't thought much of it then. Now, looking at the envelope, she realized she had seen the danger before she understood it. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside, a single photograph. Hers. Taken from somewhere she didn't recognize. Main suspect. Unknown. The photo wasn't threatening yet. But it didn't need to be. It was proof. Proof that someone had been following her life. Closely, carefully, and silently. Alyssa's breath caught. For the first time, she understood the question she had avoided asking herself. Had it already been too late? What would you do if someone you trusted suddenly felt like a stranger? Alyssa Hartman walks through the quiet aisles of her local grocery store. Her shopping cart rattles softly. From the corner of her eye, a figure lingers too long near the bakery, then quickly turns away. Alyssa freezes. That pause, that shift. It's the kind of moment that whispers you're being watched, and closer than you think. Columbus, Tennessee, local grocery store. It wasn't a direct threat. No words were spoken. Nothing obvious. Just a lingering presence. Her pulse picks up. Her brain starts connecting dots she hadn't realized were there. The photograph, the sedan, the strange glances, each separate, each seemingly innocent. Now, in the sterile fluorescent light of the store, they start to scream a warning she can't ignore. One detail didn't add up. Alyssa notices the figure reaching into a jacket pocket, just slightly. Her stomach tightens. She doesn't know what's there, but she knows it matters. Someone is preparing. She takes a careful step toward the exit. The figure mirrors her movement, subtly, without drawing attention. For the first time, Alyssa truly understands. This isn't random. This isn't a stranger. This is someone who has planned every move, quietly studying her life, waiting for the right moment. And that realization hits harder than fear itself. Because she knows. She's already inside their world. How do you react when someone you thought was safe becomes the first person you fear? Alyssa Hartman sits at her kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at a message she didn't expect. No words, just a timestamp and a location she recognizes. Her heartbeat races. Someone knows exactly where she is. It wasn't the sender's tone. It wasn't even the message itself. It was the quiet certainty in Alyssa's chest. This is no longer about curiosity. It's about control. Alyssa's apartment, Franklin County, Tennessee. The room feels smaller. The walls closer. Even the ticking of the clock seems louder. Alyssa's mind flashes back to ordinary moments from the past week. The sedan, the cafe, the photograph. All harmless once. All warning signs now. Earlier that morning, she had noticed her front door slightly ajar. Not enough to be obvious. Not enough to alert anyone else. But enough for her instincts to scream. She remembers locking it twice before leaving. Now, she wonders, had someone been inside? Had they been watching? But one detail didn't add up. The timestamp on the message shows a moment she was supposed to be alone. Yet someone knew exactly where she would be. And in that moment, Alyssa realizes the danger isn't just outside. It's already inside her world. What would you do if the person you trusted the most left a clue that screamed betrayal? Alyssa Hartman sits at her dining table, staring at her laptop. An email pops up, sent from an address she recognizes. But the words chill her. You're not as careful as you think. Her fingers tremble as she scrolls, heart sinking deeper with each sentence. This isn't random. This isn't a prank. This is proof that someone close to her has been watching, studying, waiting. Alyssa's apartment, afternoon. The apartment feels suffocating. Every familiar object suddenly seems suspicious. Her favorite mug, her keys on the counter, even the doorknob she touched dozens of times, potential evidence of intrusion. Alyssa's mind races. Who would know so much? Who could orchestrate all of this without leaving an obvious trace? Earlier that week, a coworker mentioned seeing Alyssa in a location she hadn't discussed with anyone. At the time, she shrugged it off. Now it feels like a warning, like someone is silently reminding her. They can be anywhere, anytime. The tone of the email is oddly personal. It mentions things only someone in her life would know. And that knowledge cuts deeper than fear. Because Alyssa realizes, the person behind all of this isn't outside. They've been inside her world the entire time. And the question echoes louder than ever. Who can she trust? If anyone at all. How do you feel when the person who terrorized your life finally faces the consequences? Alyssa Hartman steps out of the courthouse, sunlight warm on her face for the first time in weeks. Detective Carson Blake approaches quietly, handing her a small envelope with the official verdict. Her hands shake. Not from fear this time, but from relief. Justice has finally arrived. The person who invaded her life, who tracked her, threatened her, and tried to control her fate, will never hurt anyone again. Franklin County, Tennessee courthouse steps. Inside the courtroom, the evidence had been laid bare. The emails, the photos, the stalking, all meticulously documented by detectives Taryn Wallace and Julian Mercer. And when the sentence was read aloud, Alyssa felt the weight of every sleepless night lift slightly. Death sentence. The person responsible sentenced to the highest consequence the law could offer. Alyssa's chest ached, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was closure. The nightmare had ended. She could finally breathe. And in that moment, she realized something else. Her instincts. Every quiet, nagging feeling she'd ignored before had saved her life. For more deeply emotional true crime stories, uncovering injustice and justice served, subscribe to The Veil of Secret.